Well, good morning. I would like to welcome our panelists to our conversation this morning on our theme today for practice radical hospitality. Before we get started in talking about this theme, I want to give all of our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, share who they are, just briefly with our group today. So, who would like to introduce yourself at this time?
I'll go first. My name is Tammy, Lindle Lewis, and my husband Barry and I have recently relocated to the Pacific Northwest. We're living in Renton, Washington currently, and attending the Crystal Springs congregation. I work for Community of Christ headquarters in Independence, and so I'm working remotely while we're living here. And the work I do has traditionally centered around education and doing some editorial and project management work for formation resources, some that you may have seen or experienced. So those would be like reunion materials or disciple lessons or some of the ministry and priesthood courses. And I also have the chance to serve as one of the World Conference directors, and that's been a great joy of mine. So I'm looking forward to continuing to meet many new friends here. We love this part of the world and are happy to be here.
Thank you.
I can go next. My name is Justin DeLong. I live in Portsmouth, Ohio. I serve as a 70 in Community of Christ and serve as the Mission Center Invitational Support Minister. And I am currently a full-time student at Chicago Theological Seminary to obtain a Master of Divinity and a Master of Social Work degree. So a lot of my time and energy is going into spirituality and theology and how we can live out Jesus' mission better here on earth and be more inclusive and welcoming to everyone. And outside of that, I work full-time for a family business as the office manager, doing all of the behind-the-scenes office stuff that's not so fun. But church and reaching out to people to try to make a difference in the community is something that I really feel called to, and that's something that I see for myself moving forward. So it's good to be with you all.
Thank you.
My name is Royleane, or Roy Otteson. I've gone by that name since I was in first grade. My husband and I recently joined the Community of Christ faith within the last couple of years. We were raised in the LDS faith tradition. I consider myself a seeker still, probably an eternal seeker of spiritual, religion, all kinds of beautiful things. My work is in behavior therapy. I work with students on the autism spectrum and help them become their best selves and be able to be successful in our society. And I also just recently graduated from the spiritual direction program at the Franciscan Spiritual Center down in Portland. And I'm really excited to start my spiritual direction practice this fall. I have a passion for companioning and following alongside people on their spiritual journeys, and I'm really grateful to have been invited into this conversation. I was called and invited to be part of the pastorate team at Crystal Springs in January, and most of our time has been during COVID, so it's been a lot of fun trying out new things on Zoom and bringing our congregation together and actually seeing everyone a lot more than we were actually when we were meeting in person. And it's been a lovely bonding experience for our congregation and a learning and growing time.
Thank you. And I'm Sean Langdon. I am a 70 and I work in full-time ministry for Community of Christ in several roles here in the Greater Pacific Northwest USA Mission Center, but essentially I'm focused on invitation, youth, young adult, and camping ministries for the church out here. I was born and raised in this mission center, raised just north of Seattle, and now live in Springfield, Oregon, and so I've been a lifelong member of Community of Christ, but also of Community of Christ Expressed here in the Northwest USA. And it is good to join with our other panelists this morning for this important conversation that we're going to have in the life of the church. Okay, so moving forward, we'll get to our first kind of conversation about this topic today. So Webster defines hospitality as hospitable treatment, reception, or disposition. So then let's look at the definition of what it means to be hospitable. Webster defines that as A, given to generous and cordial reception of guests. B, promising or suggesting generous and friendly welcome. And C, offering a pleasant or sustaining environment. So if that is a baseline then for hospitality, how would you define radical hospitality?
So I guess my thoughts are, when I study about hospitality, is that it addresses some of our basic needs, our physical, social, and spiritual needs. It can sometimes be summed up as providing food, lodging, and protection for people. And so these are important, but they're also just basic. So beyond entertaining our friends and family, the more radical aspects of hospitality address our belonging and our becoming needs. And this is when we listen and share together, and when we're truly hearing people's stories, listening to their questions, their fears, their hurts, joys, and then honoring their truths and their experience. So a definition that I like about hospitality says, hospitality involves some space into which people are welcomed, and it's a place where unless the invitation is given, the stranger would not feel free to enter. So helping people to feel welcomed and at home is not the same thing as entertaining them. And the radical aspects involve helping people to be or become their true selves and making space or room for them to become complete. It's making room and holding space for their growth. And it involves not being afraid to share that space, or in some cases to relinquish that space so that others can grow or evolve. And so to me, it's about community building in a very sacred way.
There's a quote from Searching for Sunday by Rachel Held Evans that says, "This is what God's kingdom is like. A bunch of outcasts and oddballs gathered at a table, not because they are rich or worthy or good, but because they are hungry, because they said yes, and there's always room for more." And I think for me, this is what radical hospitality is a lot like, tearing down those walls that separate us and making a bigger table, creating space, not necessarily physical, where we allow the Spirit to permeate our being and our surroundings and open us up to becoming vessels of living hospitality. Radical hospitality makes space for everyone, including those who we may not agree with, who we may struggle to be in relationship with, and even those we frankly maybe don't like. And it's providing space to simply listen. Allowing someone to be heard, I think, is one of the most radically hospitable things that we can do, because we so often don't listen to understand, but to respond. And we need to be better at seeking to understand each other. And I think that is a way that we can live out radical hospitality.
I would agree with you, Sean, and everything that you also said as well, Tammy. For me, radical hospitality is the journey of becoming, basically, is Jesus's way, is following Jesus's way. And also becoming more as God, to me, has no boundaries, is boundless and is open, and that opening up our prejudices, our things constantly trying to open those up for us. And so radical hospitality is basically being in kinship with others, walking alongside, talking with them, companioning with them, those as well that we don't agree with, and trying to understand and hold space for all at the table. One of my favorite songs is For Everyone Born, A Place at the Table. And I feel that if we're honest with ourselves, we may not always feel that way. And that is what we are to strive for. And that to me is radical hospitality. And I had something I wanted to read that goes along with this as well. It goes along with the belonging. And it's from Diana Butler Bass in Christianity After Religion. And she says, belonging is the risk to move beyond the world we know, to venture out on pilgrimage, to accept exile. And it is the risk of being with companions on that journey, God, a spouse, friends, children, mentors, teachers, people who came from the same place we did, and people who came from entirely different places, saints and sinners of all sorts, those known to us and those unknown, our secret longings, questions, and fears. Whose am I? Oh God, I am thine.
I would agree with everything that has been shared. But one thing that stood out to me is radical hospitality challenges me and should challenge us to be uncomfortable and to reach out to those who society has deemed as outcasts and those people who we may not share similar backgrounds with or fully understand their beliefs or their ideas. Really challenges us to look deep down within ourselves as to how we can educate ourselves and to become welcoming and inclusive of those people, and to, quite frankly, as Roy shared, as to follow Jesus. And I'm sure Jesus found himself in a lot of uncomfortable situations, but he embraced those situations with love and peace and grace. And to me, it is welcoming the stranger, even the stranger that may have caused harm to me, or I see spewing hatred, or although it's hard to do sometimes, I think to be truly hospitable and to express radical hospitality, you have to be willing to reach out to everyone and clasp their hands, no matter who they are, what their background is, or where they came from, and to truly try to sit down and to have that conversation with people. I think that's the only way moving forward if we're going to be living radical hospitality.
Thank you all for sharing. I think we have a great framework for our other conversations this morning. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue our conversation this morning. This time I want to start us off with a scripture as a foundational piece for us. This is from the book of Matthew, chapter 10, verses 40 to 42, and this comes from the NRSV. Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward. So our question for this next segment is going to get a little bit more introspective and personal. And that's going to be, when have you experienced hospitality from someone else? And how did it make you feel?
Okay, I'll go first. So for 6 months during 2018 and into 2019, while Barry and I were in between homes, I like to say we were homeless, I guess, at that point. We had just sold our home in Independence, Missouri, and we're relocating out here. And trying to find some place that we could afford, experiencing sticker shock at the prices and how quickly homes were going here. We needed a place to stay, and I was working remotely, so I needed a place that would allow me to work during the day while Barry went off to his job. We'd been attending the Crystal Springs congregation and had a chance to meet Bill and Alma Stauffenberg, who live in Bothell, Washington. And they graciously invited us to make ourselves at home in their home. And for most of the time, they were away at their winter home, which is down in Tucson, Arizona. But there were several weeks where we shared space with them before their trip. And so not only did they provide a bed and a bathroom for us, but they trusted us in their home. And they made room for us in their pantry, the refrigerator, closets, garage, and some other storage areas for the things that we had. And after we moved, they became some of our first visitors. I think they were our first visitors here to our new home. And they brought us a lovely housewarming gift, and then we shared a meal. And it just felt really wonderful to have new friends, and to be trusted is a humbling experience by people that you've just met, to be trusted in their home. I know what that's like because I've also opened my home a couple of times and let people come in, and it can be quite an imposition to make space, to let people see how you live every day, the good, the bad, the ugly, to have it all right there as you're sharing space under a roof.
I would just share that it's the fall of 2007. I moved to Chattanooga, Tennessee, right after I had returned from Graceland. And I still can't come up in my mind as to why, that path was the path that I chose to go. But I'm glad that I did. And the generosity and the hospitality that I felt from the Munson family, who had opened their home for me to live with them for 2 years while I went to the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. And even after that, the church-owned properties where I stayed and helped do things with the congregation and provide leadership and ministry with the congregation. And that's the kind of hospitality that I feel that has made an impression on me, that sometimes we even have to put ourselves out to be hospitable to others. And to me, that was an expression of hospitality from the church that continues to shape and mold my ministry and what I perceive of the world today. It's just one example of the church being so hospitable to me. To open your home for somebody for 2 years, that's more than anyone could ever expect or ask. But they did it graciously, and that has blessed me, and I will never forget that moment.
So a few years ago, when my husband and I were looking for another faith community to attend, we went to multiple different faith communities in the area, and just the amazing hospitality from all of the clergy in all of those different places, including a Community of Christ. They would hug us while I would cry in their arms. They would let me go in and meet with them in their offices. And while I understand that's their job, their compassion for someone who's not a member of their church, who just showed up one day and was in tears in a faith crisis, was just life-saving for my husband and I. And also, I really appreciated that none of them had an agenda. In fact, multiple of them said, we love having you here and listening to you, though this may not be the place that you eventually end up, but you're welcome to journey with us as long as you need to. And so just the freedom of having someone walk along beside us and not have an agenda, and to see us as beloved and wonderful humans, especially when our own family and community at that time were struggling in their grief that we were moving to a different faith community. So for us, that was extremely huge, radical hospitality to see another as a beloved child of God and embrace them and welcome them in.
There's I think a common theme of home, whether it be spiritual or physical, in our, and certainly relational, in all of our responses for this question, and mine is no different. And there's several things that came to me. As a church employee, I am on the road often in normal, whatever that is, times, and I then rely a lot on people opening their homes to me, so that I can stay with them and then provide ministry in their local congregation or in the communities at that time. So I think about and there's several families that have opened up. One in particular in the Portland area, Mary and Wes Schlinker, who are very hospitable individuals, very, very much so. They always are welcome in their home, but I have a key to their home. So I have a key to my home, and to my mom's home, and to the Schlinkers' home. And there's always an invitation to stay whenever I'm coming through if I need a place to stay. The night before SPAC, they every year, our youth camp at Graceland University in Iowa, a lot of us stay at their house the night before, and then they take us to the airport. And so they provide a bike barbecue for us and provide all the transportation the next morning, and it's always a blessing. I also then think of the Walker family, Ken and Val Walker, when they were living in Portland, and I was in between homes, and I needed to, the place I was living at, they were selling, so we all needed to move, but it was summertime, and I was going to be gone, so moving in the summertime for me is really hard and awkward, and trying to figure everything out, and so they said, why don't you just come live with us for the summer, and then you can figure it out once all the camps are over. And that to me was just, to welcome somebody again into your home is making space for them in your space is hospitality to the max for me. I think that was such a blessing, and there's so many instances of that, and people who have just opened up their space to make space for me or for others that I really have appreciated in my own journey as well.
I feel like Community of Christ is like the expert at hospitality. Just saying from all of my experiences, Community of Christ is amazing at hospitality, and I've been in awe of how much you have to teach the world about that.
Yeah, we have to teach. Thank you all for sharing this during this segment, and sharing a little bit deeper about how hospitality has impacted your life and your journey as well. So now we're here for our last segment this morning for our conversation. And to help us get ready for the question, I wanted to lay some foundational quotes for us to consider. These also come from Searching for Sunday by Rachel Held Evans that I previously shared a quote from as well. Here's what she has to say that I think fit this question but fit our conversation. Imagine every church became a place where everyone is safe but no one is comfortable. Imagine if every church became a place when we told one another the truth. We just might create sanctuary. I prefer a church which is bruised, hurting, and dirty because it has been out on the streets rather than a church which is unhealthy from being confined and from clinging to its own security, more than by fear of going astray. My hope is that we will be moved by the fear of remaining shut up within structures which give us a false sense of security, within rules which make us harsh judges, within habits which make us feel safe, while at our door people are starving, and Jesus does not tire of saying to us, give them something to eat. That last quote from Pope Francis I. So, I think we are experiencing new understandings about community during this pandemic. It's causing us to think more about what it means to be in relation with people because we're having to do it in new ways, and we're also missing people. So I'm wondering where might our congregations and entire faith community are being invited to experience disruption, transformation, and hope as we look to expand our table. And what does practicing radical hospitality look like for us? So this is really the implementation kind of part of our conversation this morning, is how do we do this?
As we were looking at planting a new congregation in Portsmouth, we didn't want it to be church as usual, the normal Sunday morning, come in, have a seat and listen to a sermon and then go home. Our congregation is more relational. We meet on Sunday evenings. We sit in a circle. We don't have a sermon, but we have dialogue with one another. We let people express how their week has been. We give a story and how that can relate to our lives, and we just talk about life and the struggles that people are going through. And I think that allows people an opportunity to get real and vulnerable and to maybe work through some issues that they're facing in life, and gives more of a personal relationship with people rather than just standing up and preaching at them. So that's one way my congregation is trying to break the mold of church, so to speak.
Yeah, I think when you can provide a space where people feel vulnerable enough with each other to be their authentic selves, I think that you're doing radical hospitality right. I think that that's maybe a marker of knowing that we are living out this theme that we're talking about, is when people feel safe enough and comfortable enough with you to expose the things about them that maybe they wouldn't do in front of other people.
There's this quote that I see not long ago that talks about church isn't the place where you should have to check your baggage at the door, to bring it with you and to live that with other people, to work through your issues, and don't step through the door putting on a facade, or you don't have to fake it. You can be real, you can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
I think that we need to expect that we're going to be disrupted for some time, and that we need to continue to find new ways to connect with each other. Our in-person gatherings may become the exception rather than the rule for the foreseeable future. And it's sort of odd that, and maybe you're experiencing this as well, I feel more connected to people that I care about in a lot of ways than I did before, when I was free to travel and be with them. Nearly every Sunday, I go to at least one congregational worship or one worship experience. I've worshiped with the Mission Center, our congregation, even with the Western Field. We have midweek check-ins with the congregation, so I'm seeing several people at least twice a week. Our pastor team meetings, my staff meetings from work. I've been to grandkids' birthday parties. I was at a gender reveal party that was all online. A memorial service. Every week I have lunch with colleagues, and every week we have dinner with some friends that are dear to us. I'm connecting with people back in Independence that were my friends that I've been missing. There's been family gatherings. There's been book discussions, and a couple of seminary lecture series that I've attended, and even a church-wide conversation that's beginning on a new series of Herald articles. Helping us address the question that is before the church right now is, are we moving towards or with Jesus, the peaceful one? So in many ways, we are continuing these things that are important to us, but we're also inventing new ways to be together and to slow down and make that an important thing.
Yeah.
For me, radical hospitality has been kind of the key word to it has been curiosity. So just becoming curious with people that we meet, with people from the LGBTQ community, with people involved in Black Lives Matter, people involved in those different things, and becoming curious. So stepping into more difficult conversations and being curious instead of trying to have an agenda. And I feel that our congregation, we are with being able to have Zoom and be able to have those conversations, that we're all able to be with each other in those difficult conversations. And that's something that we're doing right now in real time in trying to move towards some more radical and open hospitality. I love this book from Diana Butler Bass, and there's another part in it. She she talks about the community of Jesus was a community of practice. And she says they listened to stories that taught them how to act toward one another, what to do in the world. They offered hospitality, prayed together, challenged traditional practices and rituals, ministered to the sick, comforted, grieved, fasted, and forgave. And by doing things together, they began to see differently. So I think as we journey together in community and these difficult things, and also trying new things, we can sit around and talk, and we do, like for days and years, about what do we want to do differently? What do we want to do differently? But until we actually start trying some things and not being afraid to fail, because if something doesn't work, that's okay. We know that that didn't work, and it maybe would have worked for another time, but right now that's not working for us. And to me, that's all about journeying with God. Things are constantly blowing up. This isn't working anymore. So now we're going to try something different. And that's just part of the beauty of the journey.
Yeah, I think a lot about our movement throughout the church, particularly in the U.S., I think in Canada and parts of Europe and maybe beyond, but for looking at new expressions. And here in our mission center in the Northwest, we've kind of split this up into two categories of new expressions of ministry and new expressions of community. So new expressions of ministry, where congregations will experiment with what does it mean to be missional, and that's what does it mean to be hospitable in different ways, meeting people where they're at. And so I think back to my time at the Puyallup congregation, which I've shared a lot about in the past, and the work that we did with Freezing Nights and our homeless ministry there. And I remember that my last Freezing Nights as the coordinator before I was then moving to Oregon happened to be Christmas Eve and into Christmas morning. And I was a little concerned about how the congregation would respond to hosting Freezing Nights that night, whether or not we would get the volunteers. We also traditionally had a Christmas Eve service that night, but our sanctuary was going to be full of cots and mattresses and people sleeping in there. So how would that work out? And people came through like you wouldn't believe. I just was so impressed with the radical hospitality that was extended by Community of Christ in that area, as well as the other ecumenical partners who came and provided meals, we had somebody in our congregation who made sure that everybody had a stocking of sorts to open up in the morning from our homeless community who was with us. And we stayed open later to make sure that they had a place to spend their holiday. And it's also that people were willing to give up their traditions to make space for other people on that day who didn't have space otherwise. And that was really important to me. And obviously them. I think also then think of, in terms of this question with new expressions of community, we're doing that in our mission center with our Beyond Horizons ministry for LGBTQA plus and allies, and we're doing with online ministries now. But new expressions of community have the ability for us to meet people literally where they are at in their community and to be the church, to do church in a way that works for them. And I think that what we find is that for many of us, it also works for us as well. That congregational instructions don't work even for us, those of us who are passionate about being in the ways that we know to be church as well. Like I love sitting in a pew next to people that I care about, but I also love sitting in a park or at a coffee table and sharing, and that's just as much church as anything else. And I think meeting people where they are at is a very important part of living out hospitality.
I've been following Shane Claiborne quite a bit lately, and one of the things that he he repeatedly says is that if we are to follow Jesus, then we must act like he meant the things that he said. And I think that calls us to take a step forward out of our comfort zone and to even follow the Doctrine and Covenants scriptures that call us to see what speaks in our time, to reach those in our time, and to speak in a voice in a way that they will understand and feel welcomed and included, and to challenge traditions and systems that are contrary to God's vision for creation. And that's something that to me extends beyond just the normal Sunday church, and it's something that we have to live out daily and live out communally. And sometimes we have to think outside of the box and outside of the building to accomplish that.
I think in some ways, COVID-19 has provided us the blessings of stopping, slowing down, reimagining, redefining the things that are important to us in our communities, in our worship space, what the voice of the church needs to be in our world that seems to be frayed and coming apart more often than we think. It provides us a chance to be more intentional than just going through the motions of things that we've always known and maybe have been on autopilot with. We are being confronted, many of us in the white church are being confronted with racial injustice that is systemic, and things that we had probably been blind to or hadn't paid attention to. We're reminded about our friends who are persons of color, and our other friends who are part of the LGBTQ plus community, immigrants, and the numbers of those people who are without homes or jobs or access to health care. And those are growing numbers of people. And so I think it's providing an opportunity for us, for the church, to be in mission in ways that are practical. Like Justin said, what Jesus actually said, providing practical in-person things. When did you see me hungry or homeless or in prison? When did you come and visit? So I think we have this wonderful opportunity to try to correct these things that are wrong with our world right now, because we're seeing them differently. We're having to stop, and we get to look and see how creation has taken a breath because of the pause that we've done with so many of our activities that harm the planet. So I think our congregations have to look for ways to be the church in the places where we are and with what we're able to do, and to honor that time that we do have together, because it is so very precious.
I appreciate what you said earlier too, Sean, about how some people were seeing more and some people are not able to connect online. And so that is something that, thinking about that as a congregation, while we are connecting and seeing many people more, there are also some that can't join us in that. And so that has also had us writing letters or doing personal messages to those members, a personal FaceTime talking or on the phone, and that has been really appreciated, and I think also brought some relationships closer, because there's that personal time with that person that maybe in like the rush of before all of this, we're just busy checking off the list. And so there's been that relation, and just trying to think of that as well. And also now, as things are opening up a little bit, trying to be really intentional about, okay, can these people that we haven't seen for a little while, can we gather and get together with them in a social distance, in a safe way, with a few people at a time, to make sure that they know they are loved and connected, and their voice is wanted in all of these conversations that we are having.
I think Sean mentioned earlier about the common theme between everyone is home, whether that is your personal home or your spiritual home. I remember at Pride last year, at the Pride Festival in Portsmouth, as a young lady, we allowed people an opportunity to share from the stage anything they wanted to talk about. And she shared that how attending that first Pride gave her the courage to come out to her family and come out to her friends. And I think of that as, to love someone would be to help express their worth and to make them feel at home and to feel welcomed. And I think we need to engage in our community to challenge those things that often do not allow people a space to belong. And those are just one ways that we can open ourselves up and open our churches and have activities and events that are visually welcoming to those who may be searching. And to me, that's what it's about. If we didn't get anything else out of any Pride event, that one person standing up sharing that she could finally feel like she could be her authentic self made it all worth it.
Yeah, that's powerful. I also think about some conversations I've had in the past with some leaders, but even just recently with the stuff that is before us, with social justice issues that are before us. There's things that impact our communities. And so I think about how can our congregations help provide space for dialogue, help provide space for listening. And I think there's a great opportunity with everything that's going on in the world, with things that have been mentioned here, with Black Lives Matter and with LGBTQIA plus inclusion and immigration, as well as other issues that just might be affecting our local communities. What would it look like for us for our congregations to open our doors and provide forums and just open conversation on some of these topics? And I think that is a great way for hospitality to meet mission, and have them collide together for moving forward. And so I think about the ways in which we can use. I'm not somebody who is strongly attached to structures. That's not where I'm at on my faith journey. But I think that there are ways that we can use what we have to help provide that safe space for moving forward together and for listening to each other and for seeking to understand on so many issues that face our communities and our nation and our world and us personally. And so what would it look like for us to do that? I think is a great question for us to look at. We have the space, and how can we utilize that to make change at the grassroots level? And it's hard and it's messy, and sometimes it takes us putting aside our own personal lenses to not to put them aside, but to put them on hold so we can listen to what others are also experiencing. And I find that even though I may not agree, I have a much better understanding when I hear somebody's story, when I hear their history, but which may have what led them to the position that they have. And there is then a deeper level of grace and respect with that as well.
I think one of the ways we're seeing this lived out under the New Expression umbrella is coffee and conversation. I know we do that once a week in our building, that it's non-church. You don't talk about church. You don't talk about spirituality. That's kind of the icebreaker for some who are fearful to go to church, or they've been hurt by church, so they don't want anything to do with that. So even if we're meeting at the local pub or meeting at the local coffee shop to do coffee and conversation, it allows people a chance to get to know you and for you to get to know them, to gain trust with one another, and to show them that there's no strings attached. Our mission isn't to convert you. Our mission is to build relationships and to build community. And sometimes that requires us to set aside our preconceived thoughts as to where they should be or what they should be doing, rather than, like you said, to just meet them where they're at spiritually, or they may be atheist, but they're looking for that community of people to walk with them. And I think for Christians, a lot of times that we tend to think, well, they should be doing this or they should be doing that, or you should believe this. To me, to be radically hospitable is to come into the conversation non-judgmental, with an open mind, and to just simply be with people.
I was having this conversation with a friend yesterday. I said, I was talking to my husband about if Jesus was here today, who would Jesus be hanging out with? And what, would Jesus be saying about the systems, right? And including within our own church, what traditions and stuff would Jesus be like, why are you still doing this, right? And yeah, and I just, once again, it comes back to me for curiosity that when meeting those people and going and participating in trying to listen and understand where they are coming from, then that curiosity opens up to a whole new world, and we learn so much. I just had a conversation with a friend the other day who's LGBTQ, who told me that there is such a thing as queer theology, which I had not heard or learned about yet. And in bringing it to the congregation, people want to learn. They're curious. They want to understand how can this help us in providing a more welcoming space here, and celebratory space, and learning from saying, oh, you have a lot to teach us.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. Making space for them, for somebody else to teach us, right, and not feel like we have to do one passing on everything.
You're asking the how-to questions, and that's also what I'm asking myself, because I've been, we're transplanted now here to this new space. Still in the stages of learning our way around. Working from home means that it's been difficult to get out and make friends, and now that we're home all the time, it just kind of compounds that. But I've been searching for ways that that I can find my voice, which probably means that I need to spend less time with church people and more time in my community, more time reading a newspaper or finding out about the political issues that are going on where I live, seeking out other voices that can supplement mine, and closing my mouth and opening my ears more so that I can hear and see and learn. So I know I have a lot of learning to do, just being kind of an outsider already in this area. And my congregation is in a whole different city than I live in. And so things that are important to them are not my community right now. And so going and supporting a Pride Festival, which I've done and loved, in another city is important, but I need to probably figure out how to be authentic where I live as well.
That's a great point, because we do have many people who are active in congregations who travel to other communities for worship. And so there's that balance of how do I live and be here and be active in my community, which helps shape me and help, but also then live out my membership. How do I live out my discipleship in my community, then my membership and my discipleship in my congregation as well. And that's an interesting reflection. I think a lot of folks in Community of Christ, from what I talk to, we do a good job at spending a lot of time with other Community of Christ folk. And so how do we expand our personal circles so that we are not living in a bubble as well when it comes to approaching these topics?
But I think that post-COVID-19 is beneficial to us in the sense that now we finally have a solution to meeting people who do not live anywhere near a Community of Christ. There have been several times where we've driven 3 hours to meet with people once a month to chat about church, and now we have become accustomed to Zoom, and a lot of congregations or mission centers, or at least ours, is in discussion to at least continuing our Wednesday night Zoom gathering for the mission center, even when congregations go back to meeting in person. And I think the online virtual community is really going to stick with us in that aspect as well.
Yeah, we've already committed here in the Northwest to continuing online ministries beyond the pandemic. We know that we'll continue with Sunday worships. They may be they may be in the evening or some other time, and they may not be every Sunday. But we know that we're going to continue them because the ministry that is being given now to people who don't live near a congregation or who are homebound. Also, it's sometimes it's a safer place for somebody who's seeking to find a doorway in than a congregational building. To be able to come on and say, okay, well, what are these people about? I want to hear this first before I maybe enter that part of relationship is important too. So
I think it's interesting because before COVID-19, we would throw out these ideas. Let's try and do a book club. Maybe we could all meet on Zoom since we're, kind of far apart from each other. Oh, I don't know if that will work, And then this has forced us to do it. And it's like, wow, this works amazing. So once again, in thinking about ideas is don't talk yourself out of it. Just try it. Just try it before a pandemic forces you to do it and see if it works.
Yeah. There's a meme on Facebook that I saved because I love because it's going to be great for some learning opportunities when doing some future sessions on new expressions. But it says something like, be brave enough to suck at something new. And I think that that's a level of vulnerability that we all should be willing to engage in, that we try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Maybe we have something we can learn from it to change course. And maybe it's going to thrive and meet the needs. And that's a beautiful thing.
I think one of the things that a lot of places are finding is that people who haven't been to church in a long time are joining up in Zoom now. And
yes,
we have quite a few that weren't frequent attendees of in-person gatherings, but they've been every Sunday meeting with us on Zoom.
Yeah.
And I'd like to give a shout out to really everybody, but I'm particularly thinking of those in the older populations around the church who are trying new technology and finding that they can do it. And so that makes the transition to, for people who think that, oh, I don't really have a whole lot to offer anymore, but maybe I can pray for you, which is wonderful, but not feeling safe to come out or driving at night or whatever the issue might be, they still have a voice in a ministry. And I know that I never had grandparents in my adult life. I didn't either know them or they died early. And so when I listen to some of the older members that I get to connect with share, in a way it feels like I'm learning still from that generation that is missing from my family. So shout out to all of the older people who are venturing and have done so successfully into this new world.
Yeah, we've definitely received communication from people who probably never thought that they would be doing something like this online and are trying it out and are feeling connected and are so grateful of all ages, but especially those that are older who are letting us know that it's working for them as well. I wanted to share one more thought, and then I want to ask if there's any final closing thoughts from anybody. But I guess my final thought would be that I think about how the church has approached ways of hospitality and ways that I would see as being radical, even though we may not think about it that way. I think about whenever we are willing to change our structures and our traditions to help expand the table, that is radical hospitality being lived out. And so I think about opening communion to all believers and not just our membership. I think about recognizing baptism from other traditions and allowing for just confirmation into membership as well. I think then about how, just within the last year, we got the new guidelines for doing communion online. And, it's almost like maybe we knew, maybe God was telling us something because here we are needing, relying on that. And I think that that's been a powerful expression of hospitality that the church has given has been opening our understandings to recognize there are other ways of doing things, even our sacraments, which is pretty cool. So that's my final thought. Anything else anybody else has to share as a final thought?
Just that I'm looking forward to making new friends in the mission center and meeting people outside of my little home and my congregation.
Yeah.
I just want to thank you for the opportunity for this conversation today, and also looking forward to curiosity and new, amazing, beautiful things that happen in Community of Christ and moving forward.
We'll just close with a quote from William Barber III that says, "Prophets believe that what they proclaim on any day can be transformed into real action." And I think that we are continually reminded to be a prophetic people, that we believe the things we say and believe that we can make a difference as we follow Jesus.
Amen. Well, I'd like to thank all of you for your willingness to participate in our conversation this morning. And I wish you all well and blessings as you continue your ministry where you live and beyond. Thank you all.